Hello folks, this is Leah Bonasaki from Master Lab Systems, and today we'll be looking at setting up AWS CLI for Python and FastAPI development. Wow, for any cloud-based development workflows. Okay, so let's look at why AWS CLI matters. Well, essentially it automates the AWS task from your terminal, and it makes it easier for deploying applications to services like AWS Lambda, EC2 instance, or CloudFormation, for example. And it makes it easy to manage resources like AWS S3 and the Dynamo databases and the IAM credentials for roles, which also is a little bit more essential for DevOps and serverless workflows. Also, it's a very good understanding to get the idea of using AWS CLI for developers. Okay, so let's look at the prerequisites that will require for this demo to kickstart our cloud-based development workflows or using AWS CLI. Okay, so we require Python 3.6 plus, meaning app, which is the recommended version, and a terminal or a command prompt, and a AWS account. A free tier is enough as well. Lastly, a basic application one, which we can also look at in a later stage. So the first command we need to install, well, let's get started. Okay, so going to the browser, you can just get this for example AWSCLI installer, or using just this installer for Windows. So if I copy this instance, we go to the browser and we paste that. So for Windows, you can install this, but for Linux there is also a command that you require. So with Linux, if you type, for instance, awscli installer.zip, which is the zip file to get the installer for Linux, so something like this one, for instance. Okay, let's do that and remove this. Okay, so in Linux, this is the zip file that you require, which is, you can just type in your browser or AWS Amazon CLI. It will give you the installer for Linux operating system. So once you have this installer, what else you need? For example, in my case, so once you download the installer, you then use the command to unzip and then use the install command. So in this case, let's say instance I have the command to download, so which is the curl command. Once you download it, you run the installer, which is to install. There is an unzip command that you use. Since I've already done this process, I don't want to repeat it again, as it will affect my current configuration. So from here, you run the installer. Once you get the installer, for example, if I do at my directory, so this is the installer. At my case, I've already downloaded the installer. You get the installer, and then from here you do an unzip command, which should unzip your installer. So once it unzips it, and then you run the installer, which is using this command as well. So if you don't have, for example, if you might do this unzip, it might require you to use the command unzip. So sometimes you have to install unzip command separately if you are also using Linux. So again, once you have unzipped it, you can just do /./AWS and do the install to unpack all your dependencies and install the AWS CLI. Okay, so from here, to ensure that you have successfully made the installation, you can do now AWS-v. This checks your installation if it's success or not, this command. So now it should give us, if the installation is success, you should get the version or something similar to what I will be receiving. If you can see that, so you can tell your AWS CLI the version installed and the Python version that it's using and the package itself. So there it is. So once you have that in there, then we are ready to do your CLI configuration. So of course, having this, it means now we are ready to proceed with the next steps. So again, which is what we already just done now to verify the installation. So now we need to create the IAM credentials so we can configure AWS. So again, to configure AWS on CLI, so we need to something, for example, if I do AWS configure, so it will require us, you see, this is what will be required for us to be able to connect and integrate our CLI to our cloud-based account. So we need the credentials. So let's go ahead at CLI, at console, to create an account and assign a role. And okay, so folks, once you have this page, for example, if we do AWS, you go to a browser, you type AWS, you create an account here. Once you can get to this page, meaning you've already created a free vision account, now you need to start creating a user and adding some users that we'll be using as our authenticators in our AWS CLI, in our command line interface. So from here, as you can see, I've already created my account. It's a free tier account, which is a free one. So now you can also do the same on your side. Once you, as long as you can get to this page, it means you have access, or you have already created your account. So from here, this is the only thing we need. Let's first create the IAM user. So again, you go there to create the IAM user. Okay, and then you go to users. Okay, so from going to users, currently I have only 2 users, which is an active one and an inactive one. So let's create a new one for this demo. So if I do create user, you come to, you give it username. So if I set maybe test user, that will be my name that I'm associating or giving this user. Okay, so test user, do next. Okay, so now let's attach permissions to this user. Let's give this user permissions. So it says attach policies directly, which is what we need in this case. We need to attach the policies directly. So the policy we require now, since there is quite a lot of those policies in AWS and you need to know which one you use. If you are not sure, I would strongly recommend that you use the administrator, which is what we'll be using in this case, until you are so sure that you only which certain roles you need or certain policies you require, depending on what you will be doing or what are your functions we will be working on. So as well, let's grant this user the admin access. So meaning this user will be able to do everything for this in this account, since I'm granting them the admin access, which is also not recommended if you are in organization. For example, you definitely not want to give all your users the same admin rights. So you definitely only assign what they require. So as you can see, there are quite a lot of those. So depending on what you require, you can only assign based on what you require. So in this case, let's just give it the administrator access. So if I go there and then I click next, okay, now we click next. Let's create the user. Okay, create a user. Okay, as you can see, now we have another user, which is now the test user. So for this user, it means now this user is created. We can attach this user to our AWS CLI, or we can authenticate with this user to our AWS CLI. However, and they got some rights, but at the same time, we still don't have the key and access ID for this user. So let's go ahead and create that, which is what is required for it to configure your CLI, or to authenticate to your cloud account using your AWS CLI. So now let's go ahead and create a access key. Okay, there we go. It shows us that we have this access, which is this policy, which is assigned directly to this user. But now we need to create an access. So an access key that we'll be using to authenticate. Okay, so now we'll create access key. Okay, it asks us what do we want this access key to be for. So again, depending on what your function are, but for this demo, it's gonna be for authenticating using CLI. It even says you plan to use this access key to enable the AWS CLI to access your AWS account, which is exactly what we need. So you click on that. That's the use case. You click on that, and then you confirm. You click next again. Okay, so let's give it a description. So access to AWS CLI, or access from AWS CLI. Let's do access from AWS CLI. Okay, we create access. Okay, now that our access has been created, so this is exactly what will require for us to authenticate to our AWS cloud account. So we have the access key and a secret access key, which is I'm not gonna be showing that. So now you can download these, because these are what will be requiring to authenticate to our account. So now we have that. Okay, and we have the secret key, we have the access key and the secret key, right? So now what we need to do now, we just need to go to our AWS account. So for instance, once you can just copy them directly from here, or you can just download from the download link. So now we have those. We can go to our AWS CLI to do the authentication. So using the command AWS configure, you will have to type out your access key ID. Once you type your access key ID, for example, if we say we were typing our, okay, let's double check if I can do that. Okay, well, this is what will be required. Let me just, I don't want to overwrite my current existing settings. So, but typing AWS configure will give you this instance. Well, okay, let me just go back again. So, but let's say you've copied those. Okay, well, let's just download them once and for all. Either way, I will delete this user. Okay, so you have your access keys there. So again, well, maybe let me just copy this one in to use it. Okay, so from here to AWS configure. Okay, I will type it in front of you. So exactly now it requires what? A access secret key. So let's say we type something else here for the access secret key. This is what now it will require, which is now the default region. So here you can just directly type none, for example, and the output you can also print out JSON, or you can just type JSON, or you can leave it empty, it will still work. So once you do that, you enter save. So after doing save, automatically your configuration, your local configuration should be fine, but we can test that again, which is what I will be doing to ensure that we can test the configuration that we did to our local. Okay, so by testing that, it means now we can try to request a resource from the console, or we can try to list out the resources we have on the console. So one comment I like to use just to test that. So again, going back to our slides, so which is now we just did this section to create the IAM user. So now we've done this is configuration. So again, this is the same command I showed you on the command line. If you type it awsconfigure, it will prompt these four things. So which is the AWS access key ID, the secret access key, and the region, which is normally the default one, US East. And the output format, you can type JSON, text, or YAML. That's and your credentials will be stored there. So that's where they are going to be stored once you have entered all of the prompted. Okay, so from there, so now let's test our configuration. So again, using this command, which is the AWS STS test, so which is now what we are our last steps. So now if we do a test, for example, so let's do get caller ID. So using this command AWS STS get caller identity, it's going to print out your authenticated credentials, meaning our caller identity. So let's hit enter and test. Okay, as you can see folks, the user ID, that's my user ID account, but one thing that you can see is the secret key, which is private. So as well as you can see, I'm using that user, which is the master lab user, so which is the my existing user that I've already created. So again, okay, let's hit done. So as I said, there is your test user. So however, in this case, I'm currently using my existing user that I've already created. So once you do that folks, you can get your caller identity. It means now you have successfully authenticated. So one last thing we need to test now is to see if we can be able to call out the resources we have. Okay, for example, let's go to S3. I have a bucket I've created for my deployment. So I'm just gonna list that bucket out using the list command. So meaning if we can be able to return it from the command line, it means the access point has been created successfully and we can authenticate and be able to access resources on AWS console. Okay, so this is my bucket. So now if I go to my command line again and I do, for example, S3, using this command AWS S3 ls, since this user already have the administrative access, it means they can be able to access anything with my S3. So as I said, again, depending on what roles or policies your user have, it means it will identify what they can access. But in this case, for any user that has got administrative access policy in place, it means they can access anything. So again, if I do AWS S3 ls to list out my available bucket using this account, let's go ahead and run. Okay, as you can see folks, there it returns it. So now we can get our available bucket. So using this way, this is how you could configure your AWS CLI for your cloud workflows. Okay, so also now if you can follow, previously I created a video for deployment for Python FastAPI to deploy to AWS Lambda using serverless framework. So again, this is just a tutorial to show you how I did the configuration, since I didn't showcase it to my previous tutorial. So again, if you like this video, please folks, if you like this video, please like and subscribe to my channel, and also please share. If you have any questions or comments, please post them in the comment section below. I will be answering those. Otherwise, I will be ending here folks. Again, if you want to see how the deployment is done to deploy a Python FastAPI, you can look at my previous tutorial, which is I've already uploaded. It shows how you will do the whole end-to-end deployment to AWS Lambda using serverless framework. Okay, so folks, I will be ending here. Please, thank you for your time. Cheers, bye.